Are you ready?
Let's go.
Now circling in the neutral zone.
Here's the pitch on the way. 36 yards for the win.
This.
Here comes a big chance. The shot
is
this the dagger.
the neutral zone.
Home run. Good.
This is as good as it gets.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca.
Now, here's your host, two-time Paralympian, Brock Richardson.
What's going on? It's time for another edition of The Neutral Zone. I am indeed your host, Brock Richardson, and today we are going to get the opportunity to speak with a journalism student. His name is Kristian Cuaresma, and he is from the Toronto Metropolitan University, who happens to have an interest in parasports as well. Plus, we're going to discuss nuts and bolts from the mainstream sports world, and we might get to some changes that may happen in the landscape of sports media. All that coming up, and who knows whatever else. I'm joined by Cam Jenkins and Josh Watson. Here comes your headlines.
Neutral Zone headlines.
Wheelchair Rugby Canada has extended the deadline to apply for the position of national team head coach. The deadline to apply is now Friday, December 20th, 2024. Interested applicants can apply either at sirc.ca/jobs/head-coach-national-team or at wheelchairrugby.ca/we're-hiring-2. Questions can be emailed to info@wheelchairrugby.ca.
Summer McIntosh wins the Northern Star Award, Canada's top athlete in 2024, and she has set some new world records at the World Championships, which have taken place or are taking place, depending on when you're listening to this, and she's well deserving of this honor. And when we get to talk Summer McIntosh, even in December, that means we should talk to Devin Haru around the corner at some point.
And congratulations also go to the WNBA's Indiana Fever player, Caitlin Clark, for winning the Athlete of the Year. So congratulations to Caitlin Clark, and I'm expecting great things from her in her sophomore season.
Those are your headlines. If you want to get a hold of us on social, here's how you can do that.
And welcome back to the Neutral Zone broadcast booth.
Play ball!
We're set to get this bowl game underway. The first pitch is brought to you by Brock Richardson's X account at Neutral Zone BR. First pitch and a strike. Hey gang, why not strike up a chat with Claire Buchanan from the Neutral Zone? Find her on X at Neutral Zone CB. There's a swing of the chopper out to second base, right at Claire as she picks up the ball, throws it over to the first base for a routine play.
Out!
And fans, there's nothing routine about connecting with Cam and Josh from the Neutral Zone at Neutral Zone Cam J and at J Watson 200. And the Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.
We are pleased to be joined by a journalism student, Kristian Cuaresma, who is from the Toronto Metropolitan University, who happens to have an interest in parasports as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It was a really generous offer, and once you presented it to me, Brock, I was like, yeah, no, this makes a lot of sense. I couldn't wait I've been looking forward to this for the last couple of days.
If we can start off, Kristian, where did you get your interest in journalism from?
Yeah, no, that's a good question to kind of jump off, Josh. I think really for me, I loved sports growing up, and that's where it all really started. I viewed sports as a social cheat code of some sorts as a kid. And really it is now when I go to functions or events where I don't really know anybody. It's my easy way into conversations and getting to know new people. And I've used that strategy for forever. And then I combine that with, I'm your stereotypical love to tell stories kind of journalist archetype. But I think the one thing I really enjoy about storytelling through journalism is that you can tell a singular story in very different ways, depending on a writer's style, signature flair, experiences. And I just love that part of journalism. It's always been appealing to me. And I know I love writing, guys, because the journalism industry is not in the greatest shape. Really, any kind of creative space is you kind of struggle. It's tough to survive in. But for me, part of the appeal is I've always been stubborn with what I like. And the other part, B, I think if you're really good at something, I think that will always be valued and always be wanted. And I want to get to that point. Far from it, but I want to get to that point. And then really lastly, I'm a firm believer, you don't notice good writing, but bad writing or sloppy writing really kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. So I think another appealing part of studying journalism is just trying to develop my communication skills, my writing skills. I think that's a good, strong base foundation to have for a lot of different fields. So, I mean, I could get into PR, marketing, social media, film, podcasting, any kind of operations role, even outside of that. So there's some flexibility there. So those are the things I liked about journalism.
So where did the interest in working with parasports come from then?
Yeah, Kim. I think for me, I know once I started at TMU, so 3 years ago, I really wanted to go out of my way to tell more unique sports stories. I think if you look at everyone within the sports industry, anyone who's worth a spot in that industry, they're all very good at your standard sports narratives. They're all good at telling good recaps, analyzing stats, creating narratives through standings, the stereotypical sports plot points. But I think the stories that go beyond that are the more captivating ones, or they have more mass appeal. Athletes, to me, at least the high level ones, they are some of the most fascinating people that you'll ever meet, because they have such a crazy amount of obsession into achieving something in this one lane. They make it their whole identity. They sacrifice so much. And even at the end of it, it's not guaranteed that you'll finish in that 1% of, becoming a pro athlete. So there's such already a rich, strong base to kind of tell good stories on. So I knew I wanted to tell more unique stories, but I think in going through that process, guys, I think I gravitated towards more, women's sports, women's basketball. But this past year, I promised myself the first chance I got, headed into my third year, I was going to start, or at least begin to write a story about, para-athletes or parasports. And I finally got that chance to diversify in my sports journalism class. And it so happened that 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, I met Claire, who you all are familiar with through a mutual friend. And so it all kind of fell into place. And that's really the interest kind of started for me. And the thing I love about the elite athlete, or at least the type of athlete that gets to do what they love to do on a meaningful platform, is that they have all these challenges that they have to overcome. They have all these struggles, but then you look at the para athlete, they have those same struggles, same challenges. And Brock, you and I talked about this with our chat, but they have their own unique challenges on top of that. And so to me, it's arguably even more fascinating than watching your standard athlete. So that's where a lot of the interest kind of stems from.
You recently did a piece on Claire and Brock as well, as I understand it. In those conversations, it was mentioned that in parasports, it's really about finding the initial story, and then you just keep digging and you find more and more unique stories within the community. I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. To me, it's like finding a good book from an author you weren't really familiar with or weren't really tapped into, and you're bummed out when you finish that book. And then you do a little bit of research and you're finding out, oh man, that author wrote some other really good novels, and you dive into that. Or more accurately, you're discovering a genre of novels that you had no initial familiarity with or interest with before, and now you're diving into that. So for me, I finished up that story about Claire, and then afterwards I was like, okay, I spent all this time looking this stuff up. I want to keep going, but there's just so many different directions I can kind of go from here. Just like with anything that's worthwhile. So for me right now, it's just trying to be more familiar with that lore of parasports and the whole community in general. learning more about the different athletes that kind of pave the road to get to the point that this space is in now. So like more recently, I was watching videos on Trisha Zorn Hudson and her dominance, but not just her dominance, because we're familiar with the stereotypical dominant athlete archetype. Like everyone knows about the stories, but Trisha's story, she's not just dominant, but she's dealing with being visually impaired, and she was the first visually impaired athlete to get a Division I scholarship. So those are the, you talk about unique stories. Those are the ones that I've been kind of diving into more of. More recently, India's Navdeep Singh, he has that narrative of struggle at first and overcoming that struggle. We're very familiar with that in pop culture and sports in general. But not only is Singh doing that, finishing fourth in Tokyo and then winning gold in Paris, but he's also an income tax inspector for India. And, he's also dealing with being mocked online and in real life for his stature, having to deal with dwarfism. Imagine having an Olympic gold medalist for the able-bodied community, being mocked for physical stature or anything to do with your physicality. That wouldn't happen. And so those are the unique stories that I'm starting to kind of discover, just scratching the surface in this space. And that was just in my own time and had nothing to do with the assignment on Claire. But I think there's value for any journalists who want to start spotlighting para-athletes around the world, that they become first familiar with the history, how we got to this moment. There's a lot out there, but it's worth it for sure.
Yeah, it seems like that, and we know there's a lot of ableism, and it sounds like that's what that is. And it'd be nice to kind of bring the forefront of the story of the athlete rather than always concentrating on the ableism of it.
Yeah, no, I would just say that's one of the biggest struggles and the disconnects. I think for me, as someone who's able-bodied, I think that's the low-hanging fruit in terms of trying to find some kind of familiarity and connection with that space. But I think, it's important to highlight that stuff, the differences. But I think the similarities even between both communities is also super interesting. It's really trying to meld those two approaches together. That way we're able to tell better stories for the parasport community.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a young student, where do you think some of the gaps exist in the media for parasports?
Yeah, I think just kind of riffing off the point I made earlier, I think educating ourselves, and when I say ourselves, the able-bodied community, on the history of parasports, I think that's super important. You can't really highlight landmark achievements or spearhead, good storytelling that's happening in real time without being familiar with the space in the first place. I think also, I talked to Brock about this, familiarizing myself with terminology, protocol, ruling, structure of parasports is key. When I was talking to Claire, Claire was going over classifications and categories. And guys, I admit, it was very difficult for me to keep up with. And it was something I just have never had to account for. And that's a privilege, right? That's a privilege I've been lucky to have. But I think, again, to be involved in this space, understanding that better is just a requirement. Continued coverage and support is key, but it can't be, and you guys are familiar with this, it can't be just transactional support. So I know that's tricky for the journalism space that, needs to survive on eyeballs and financial support, but coverage of parasports needs to be considered an investment, and an investment that's worth it. It's not something that you might see immediate return on, but it's a very long-term vision type of thing. I'll use the WNBA and women's soccer as an example. The uptick we've seen in the support for both of those communities have been amazing. And it's great that people are jumping on this bandwagon, but there are writers and fans that have invested in those spaces prior, so those leagues could even stay alive. And there's documentation and stories and quote unquote characters already in play. So when fans jump in, they're able to catch up. So I think that's key.
Yeah, the classifications are definitely the deep end of the pool, that's for sure. And it's really the exposure from journalism that I think helps these sports to grow, as you mentioned. Given that you are someone who's kind of just coming onto the scene relatively recently, can you talk to us about some of the positive things you've seen?
Yeah, and I'm still kind of green in the space, but I think I'll just use my perspective of being a student, and I speak about this through the lens of someone who's just clearly still green, still naive, still learning. But as someone who's currently in the classroom, I can tell you, at least from my classes at Toronto Met, there are a lot of students who want to tell these stories. And so, for example, I thought I was being unique in my approach of choosing to cover a para-athlete in our class. But when it came down to the section of our semester that involved peer review and having to review our classmates' stories, I was pleasantly surprised by how many other people were choosing to write about parasports as well. And this was a big big selection. It was a big portion in terms of our grading as a whole for the semester. And we could all choose our own stories to chase. And there was a lot of us. And our TA, Julia Rainey, she recently graduated from TMU. So she's a couple steps ahead of us, but she wrote a great feature on Raphael Toussaint a couple months ago on Sportsnet. So there's a genuine want there. And, going back again to my prior conversation with Brock, we had CBC's Devin Haru come in. And he came in as a guest, and I remember during the Q&A, the most common questions that were asked didn't have to do with his coverage of the Paris Olympics, but coverage of parasports, particularly coverage during the Paris Olympics and the parasports part of it. So there's a real interest there from the next wave of journalists to help keep pushing this forward, I guess.
So if I gave you a blank canvas and there were absolutely no barriers, in what way would you go from here?
I'm not actually sure the exact direction, if I can be super transparent, but I do know that I want to continue learning about the community. That might be like a cop-out answer, I think, but I think it's important. I want to learn more about the community because if I rank all the sports and athletes that I'm passionate about and have knowledge about, again, just to be very clear, parasports ranks near the bottom of that. And so there's a lot of catching up for me to do. There are so many reasons that go into that, whether it's, lack of coverage, lack of financial support. It's not put in our faces. It's not on mainstream social like the other sports are. But I think it's on me and any other journalists who want to cover this space to kind of sift through that. I want to especially listen to those who are experts of the space and who are part of the parasports world. Basically, all the things I would have done when picking up your standard new sport, that's the strategy I want to approach. When I first got into the NFL, I knew nothing about the players. I knew nothing about the rules, knew nothing about the league, and it felt super overwhelming. But I just consumed everything I could at my own pace. And now it's like one of my favorite sports and favorite leagues. And I think I just have to apply that same kind of mindset. Also, I think that, and I speak for myself, but for journalists in general, and really anyone who gets into a position where they have some kind of influence. So like for me, pitching stories to editors, or let's say someone who's in marketing, when it comes to decide if you have any kind of say in how to allocate marketing dollars, for example, that you go to bat for the para-athletes and the parasport community. I think that's a good place to start for myself.
I'm curious, you mentioned earlier a bit about some of the athletes that you've looked into, and we'll see if this is an easy question or a hard one to possibly finish up on. Is there a particular story you've come across that you're just like fascinated by or that really caught your attention?
Out of the ones I've covered, so, I mean, Claire is an easy one only because it's, Claire is part of my general circle as someone who I've met through a friend. Claire would be an easy one. And I think also that's part of the reason why there's a disconnect with the able-bodied community in the parasport. They don't become genuinely interested until it kind of hits closer to home. So that's maybe like for a sociology podcast. But past Claire, Raphael Toussaint was a good story because she was just breaking barriers. I mentioned Trisha Zorn. I think really anyone that is the first to do something special in their field, I'm naturally gravitating towards. So those are like the examples that I'm familiar with as I begin to learn more. I think the next thing I'm going to start looking into, though, is I noticed, I've just done very minimal research into this, but I've noticed that the medal count for both the able-bodied Olympics and the Paralympics are very similar at the top. So you have the US, you have China, you have Great Britain, all kind of finishing top 3, top 4, top 5, top 10 if you have you. So on one hand, there's that structure that's already there. So it's like the argument of if these countries can be consistently dominant in both parasports and traditional quote unquote able-bodied sports, then you can also make the argument that it's worth investing in both equally or more equal than what you're doing now. But the one thing that really fascinated me was Brazil is a country that constantly finishes outside of the top 10, top 15 in able-bodied sports. But in parasports, they finish typically top 7, top 5. And so I want to start looking into next, like the athletes from Brazil, what they're doing in terms of like developing their para athletes there and what they're doing different in comparison to their traditional able-bodied athletes. So the similarities, I think, is what interests me most, but then I also contrast that with the differences, and I'm trying to find out why a country like Brazil can excel better in parasports. So those are the things that kind of interest me the most. Also, I think if the next step in growth, and you guys are already familiar with this, is trying to develop some kind of consistency and added support in our universities and colleges. I think a big reason why sports in general excel and are valued so deeply in the States is that it starts with their college sports culture. And you have, I'm assuming that some of the best Canadian para athletes will have no choice sometimes but to go to the States to play para sports. So, talking to Claire, Claire was telling me how if, growing up, if you're really good at wheelchair basketball, you're going to Alabama, right? They just excel at that. They're a dynasty.
I'm in Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois, exactly. So I think trying to develop some kind of consistency and added support and increased support here through our schooling, so maybe they have other options, I think would also be a good place to start. But those are the things that kind of interest me most and maybe serve as a compass for what I'm trying to look into next.
Yeah, and I think that with going down to the States, they also get scholarships down there, and in Canadian sports, you don't get that. So I think that's a lot like the able-bodied sports as well. If you want to be able to succeed and get your education paid for, that's why if you're into wheelchair basketball, it's best to go down to the States. So maybe a bit more of a level playing field if they did that in Canadian sports or Canadian universities and colleges. Unfortunately, they don't do that. They choose to put their dollars in a different area or a different place.
Goes back to what you say about, the almighty dollar all the time, Cameron. Unfortunately, the almighty dollar is what speaks the language, and that's what talks to everybody. And at the end, money is the thing that drives it all. And if you get more money from somewhere, or money period from somewhere and not somewhere else, that's where people are going. And it's clear in the world of parasports. Kristian, we spoke together for about 25 minutes, and I told you then that we could have spoken for an hour, and we just spoke again for another close to 20 minutes now. And for me, there's two things here that stood out to me that makes me a believer in that the future is bright for journalism and parasports. The first one for me is the fact that you actually took on or tried to take on the understanding of classification, because I, as a para sport athlete, still don't always understand classification. So the fact that you even said, let me walk down this road as windy as it's going to be, I can do that. And the second thing that stood out to me was one that came out of this interview, and that's the fact that you did more stories beyond your assignments. So most times when you talk to students, it's, I did an assignment. This was part of my project. It was great. Well, I did it. And that's that. For you, you took it another step and you said, no, I'm going to do this beyond that.
Yeah, no, I think it was easy for me, and I'm sure it's easy for a lot of other journalists who just enjoy telling stories straight up, right? I think, and I guess I can only really speak for me and my experiences, but I think because there was a disconnect there, and because I wasn't as familiar with para sports as I was with other sports, I think it made it easier for me to write a story and to tell a story. I didn't have any biases. I didn't have any expectations, to be honest, when it came to it. So everything that came afterwards was just in my opinion, just came from a raw and genuine place. And then once I got into it, like I was mentioning to you, gentlemen, I just found, hey, I'm, again, just barely scratching the surface. There are so many stories that have already been told. There are so many stories that still need to be told. And regardless of what happens, not just, for me and my future, but for the future of para sports, I just know that I want to play some kind of role in helping pushing it forward, just like you guys do on the Neutral Zone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reality of where we live and the existence of where we live and all of that. It's all about people that want to do what they want to do. And the fact that you're saying, no, I'll jump in the pool and I'll get involved is a real big testament to the future of writing and journalism and all those kind of things. So we greatly appreciate the time you took to do this interview, and thanks again so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Neutral Zone is sponsored by the Ontario Para Network. Their focus on the growth and development of wheelchair basketball, tennis, and rugby in Ontario.
It's always a great thing to talk to up-and-coming students and up-and-coming athletes and up-and-coming people in general. And we just had that opportunity with Kristian, who's a journalism student, and it was a great conversation. We have so much to get to in this last half an hour, but I just want thoughts from both of you about the future of journalism and parasports in general from that interview that we just heard. Cameron, start with you.
Yeah, it was a great interview. It was a very nice gentleman. He called us gentlemen, which I was going to correct him on, but I didn't. So, yeah, no, it was great. And I was really surprised when he was saying that, when people were doing their assignments and everyone was basically telling the prof or professor what they were going to do, there was like a lot of people that wanted to do parasports. And I found that fascinating that so many people wanted to do that. So, just by that little glimmer of hope, it seems like the world is going to be more inclusive, and it already has, and it seems to be moving forward in the right direction. So I was really happy to hear that.
Yeah, it was a great interview. Kristian's a very well-spoken student, future journalist. I was really impressed to hear how much time and effort he'd put into learning about Claire and other para-athletes, and not just the ones that you hear about, but looking back at the ones from the past who have paved the way to get here. Because really, it's a cliche, but we stand on the shoulders of giants. Like, we wouldn't be where we are if it weren't for people that came before us. So I was really, really impressed by that, and just his overall knowledge. And I think when we look at what you were pointing out, Cameron, about the number of students that chose to do para-athletes as they were doing their peer review, I believe that stems from people like Devin Haru and Scott Russell, because if they're not
100%.
putting those stories in front of the public, those stories don't get heard. And so I really think those two deserve the credit for what Kristian sees in his journalism class. And again, the folks like Devin can't do it all themselves. So it's great to hear that there's others out there that want to bring these stories forward, because they are really, really captivating stories, whether it's Jacob Wasserman or Brianna Hennessy or anyone else. That everyone has a story and they deserve to be told.
Yeah, I mean, I said it in the interview, and I'll say it again now. I had the opportunity to spend some time with Kristian before we did the podcast and then during the podcast. And to me, that's the future. That is the future of journalism. That's the future of what we're going to see. And it takes somebody willing to dive into the deep end and not just those surface level stories of, oh, this person won, X gold medal at X Paralympic Games. It's bringing out the stories that make people want to go into it. And I was going to joke with him, Cameron, and ask him if he was talking to you, when he was telling us about, it's about the people who are investing money, who bring in that dollar, who need to get tapped. And I was going to joke with him, Cameron, and say, have you been talking to Cameron? Because that's what Cameron spends ample amounts of time talking about on this podcast.
No, 100%. And that's what you need. Money makes the world go round. And, I'll keep saying it. It'd be nice if, a company or organization put money into parasports as far as from a media perspective to get it out there. Because if it's out there and it's out there quite a bit, then people pick up on it and then they start to care about it. But if it's never in the media, then, it's just not there anymore. And I think now we're seeing with women's sports, it's flourishing because it's in the media. They're starting to get their own hockey league, their own basketball league. Toronto with the basketball, Toronto Fever. No, sorry, that's Tempo. The Indiana Fever, Toronto Tempo. It's showing that another minority group, women, they're being advertised now as equals in some respects. And it's showing how great that, by promoting it and getting the money to be able to do the leagues, how it's thriving and people are making money off it. So I don't see any reason why, a minority of being the disabled community and in this case, disabled sports, also can't get funding to have more leagues. Like they have it over in England and Germany and over in Europe. They actually have wheelchair basketball leagues over there, and there's a lot of people that show up to them. So why can't they do it here? There's no reason they can't. So this is a shout out to all of the companies, organizations, the big corporations. New year, start investing in parasports and get that going, because there's a lot of great sports, great action, and people would love to see that, I'm sure, if they were exposed to it.
So much to get to, as I mentioned. Let's start with a couple of things that you guys I added to our docket very late. The first one is the fact that the Para Hockey Cup, which has gone through 6-7 names now. I don't even know what this thing has been called. It's been the Canadian Tire Cup, it's been the Para Hockey Cup, it's been the World Challenge, it's been a whole bunch of things. As of today, it is called the Para Hockey Cup, which recently concluded. It was in PEI, and the event saw the United States, which finished first, Canada, which finished second, and China, which finished third, over Czechia, which did seem kind of like a bit of a surprise, I think, to some people who watched it, myself included. For me, I was looking at, when I watched this gold medal game, I thought, okay, what did Team Canada learn from their victory at the World Championships in May, which were in Calgary, turns out they lose to the United States 4-1. Said and done at this event. Josh, you and I texted back and forth a little bit during this game. Did we learn anything? Because it's hard for me to find what we learned.
Well, I think what we learned is that you can't take your foot off the gas, because if you do and you give the Americans an opening, they will barge right through it. If I remember the World Championships correctly, I'm combining the names now.
It's hard not to.
I know. But if we look back to the World Championship, I think what you saw was that Canada focused on defense and focused on shutting down the big players, the Declan Farmers and the Brodie Roybles of the team. This time around, I just feel like they played 30 minutes of great hockey, but unfortunately the game is 45 minutes. And that last 15 minutes is what really cost them. They seem to get away from everything they had been doing as soon as that 2-1 goal was scored.
And was it the speed, in your opinion, Josh, of the Americans?
Yes and no. I think the Americans are very, very good at breaking out of their zone. And unfortunately, if you're not watching and if you're not counting heads and making sure that the team is in front of you, then you're going to end up with a cherry picker, if you will, and they're going to make that pass to the red line. Whether it's Declan or Brodie or somebody else is going to be there to receive the pass, and you've got a breakaway in on Corbin Watson. And Cameron, you and I are both goalies. We know once there's a breakaway, you're messed
They're
up.
so easy to save and defend when it's on a breakaway.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So easy. So, yeah, it felt like a couple of breakaways just cost them. And once that second goal went in for the Americans, and definitely when the third goal went in, it was just like the team went, okay, that's it, we lost. And the game's not even over, and you're trying to force things, and you're just not sticking to fundamental hockey, and you're not playing your defensive positions. Like, this team will kill you if you let it. And in the World Championship, they did a really good job of keeping things under wraps, and this time they didn't.
Yeah, and I think that comes to the speed that the Americans have had, especially the past few years. And if they're getting breakaways, to me, that's showing that their defense isn't falling back enough, because they need to be further back in order to be able to defend that, especially if a person is as fast as a Declan Farmer is. They need to be better defensively, and that's usually by, stepping back or sledging back, ice hockeying back, whatever way you want to say it, to be able to,
I would just say
defend that.
back.
Skating back. There you go. Well, we'll go the easy way and say skating back. So, but you need to do that in order to be able to not get those breakaways. And that's why, sorry to put the NHL into this conversation and the Toronto Maple Leafs, because, I'm a Leaf fan, so that's how I can best relate to it. But with the previous coach, Keefe, it was more of a skilled and east-west, but now under Brube, it's north-south, and they're much better defensively. Like, under Keefe, there seemed to be quite a few 2-on-1s or breakaways from the other team, but under Brube, there haven't been as much. And that's because that the defense are kind of hanging back, not being able to give up that 2-on-1 break or that breakaway goal.
It's okay. You can always relate the Leafs to our conversations. It's fine. We are blessed to be with an Ontario network, that Ontario-based company that allows us to talk about the Maple Leafs. So please, by all means.
Well, that's the best way to explain it, because like a lot of our listeners are probably from Ontario, or everyone knows the Leafs. Sorry to be all cocky about it, and everybody knows the situation. So to be putting it in terms like that, people will understand about the breakaways and how to stop the breakaways.
I think there was a couple of things that bothered me, particularly from the broadcast. And Josh, you'll be able to weigh in on this because I know you watched it. It was broadcasted by Paul Hollingsworth and Paul Rosen. And Paul Rosen, of course, is the goaltender who won in 2006 the gold medal. But one of the common themes that I kept hearing, whether it was pregame, during the game, whatever, was that, oh, this is a stepping stone for Milan. This is a stepping stone for Milan. And I'm just like, Russ has been here since the beginning of this cycle. How are we discussing a stepping stone after coming off of a gold medal victory? How are we looking at this? And is it Josh that TSN, particularly Paul Hollingsworth, doesn't see the game more than just when he broadcasts it the one time a year? Or am I right to be a little frustrated with, can you really call this a stepping stone?
If it's a stepping stone, I think they took the wrong direction. I think they picked the one that was behind them. I don't blame...
Fell on their face in the water.
I don't blame Hollingsworth for that necessarily, but Paul Rosen should know better, in my opinion. And if, as I said, if this was a stepping stone, it was a step back, because in my opinion, it was the same thing we've seen from this team in the past. It was a few players on the American team getting loose and taking breakaways on Corbin or Adam Kingsmill or whoever the goalie du jour happens to be, and having no defense behind them. So if this is a stepping stone to Milan, that's great. That's fine. But you better learn from this and go back to what you were doing at the World Championship, because that worked. This didn't.
9 times, Cameron, the U.S. has won this para hockey cup.
I know.
Now, and it's always in Canada, and that to me is the challenge here that exists. The last time they won was with Greg Westlake, Brad Bowden, Billy Bridges, and I understand this is a small tournament. I get it. But I just, like, for me, I watched that gold medal game thinking, okay, we took a step forward with winning world championships, which everybody always gave the whole, our monkeys off the back, you know, all that. And then I watch that and I just go, huh? Stepping stone? I'm confused. It reminds me of that Price is Right game where they have to step on the numbers for the car, and they either have to step left, right, forward, backward, and then there's either the ding or the that tells you it's wrong. And they didn't even step on the board at this event. Like, it didn't happen, Cameron. It wasn't even close.
Yeah, like I don't know what to say. Like, is the monkey back on Canada again because they lost? Or are they still like hopeful because they won the championship, a few months ago? Like, it honestly astonishes me that they just need to play better defense because the Americans have a fast team. And maybe they need to do some more recruiting to get some quicker defensemen. I don't know what it is because I'm not around the players day to day or the team day to day, but that's what it looks like through my lens.
I kept hearing, and maybe you picked up on this, Brock, was they talked about trying to be physical, particularly with Declan Farmer. Well, being physical is great, but if to be physical, you're out of position, then you're not helping yourself at all. You're just setting yourself up for a quick pass or a dump out that somebody who's loose is going to get to. And I didn't notice them being that much faster this time than the Canadians, but we've seen in the past that you're right, Cameron, they are a fast team. And so you have to play defense accordingly. And you can't just let the puck get behind you, essentially. And that's what we keep seeing. And I feel like every time we have these kind of conversations, I talk about not wanting to call for somebody's job. But at some point, if your team is not progressing, that's on your coaching staff. And Greg is new to the coaching world, and that's great. I would love to see him progress through that and maybe be the head coach one day. But right now, this team has to really look at itself in the mirror and say, how did we let that get away when we know we can beat them?
Yeah. I mean, you tasted it. It was there for you, and I just didn't see enough of a follow-up from the World Championships. What I saw at the World Championships gold medal game was guys, sacrificing themselves, getting in front of pucks. I'm not saying they didn't try to do that, but man, the U.S. had an answer for them in this tournament, and it feels like when Canada goes down 1-0, now it's proven wrong because they tied it up, and then the floodgates open after that. But it feels like when Canada goes down 1-0 against the United States, it's like, oh boy, we're down, 4-5, and it's only 1. Like I said, I was proven wrong, and I was happy to see them come back. But I just don't see that picking ourselves up off the mat and saying we can do this. And particularly, I'm not sure which one of you said it, but it's that particularly that, oh, we're down 3-1, let's fold the tent, or we're down 2-1, let's fold the tent. And that's not the approach you want to have. And Brodie Roybal was interviewed, I believe, in the second period, and the commentator asked him, what do you guys have to do going into the third period, because it was 1-1, and his answer was, well, I mean, if they can keep Brodie Roybal down for a third period, if they can keep Declan Farmer down for a third period, I'll believe it when I see it. And sure enough, Declan Farmer gets involved in the scoring in the third, and that's what the difference was there. So for me, I was bothered by the stepping stone comment. I wanted to see a little bit more. Was I win, gold, or bust on this one? No. Do I think the monkey's back on their back? No. But it is a lot of that same old habit. And like we talked about before, when they won the Worlds, we can say that they've made a step forward, but it's how do you put the chips forward, moving forward from that and building off of it. And I just simply didn't see it. Any other comment on this, or shall we move on? You're both shaking your head no, so let's move on. Bill Belichick, remember that guy? We're gonna chat a little bit about Bill Belichick as we close out the show.
Of nightmares.
Yeah, right. Me too. When I put it on, I was looking at his resume, which we'll go through in a minute, but I was like, oh yeah, a lot of these wins are against AFC East, and those are painful. So. Yes. Bill Belichick, he becomes the coach of the University of North Carolina. Here are his NFL stats as we know them. He has had 333 wins, which is kind of a cool number to have. He's had 12 total Super Bowl appearances. 8 of those were victories. 2 of them was as an assistant. When we look at these numbers, Cameron, how, in your mind, does any of this translate to the college game? Or are we just hiring Bill simply because of his resume? Where do you sit on that?
I think they're hiring him for his resume. And I think that even more so, Bill Belichick, he wants to be in charge of the entire program. So he wants total control. And he had a press conference where he says that, he wants to develop NFL players, being a kind of like an AHL farm team to get people to go to the NFL. And I think that, he talks about nutrition. He talks about, just playing the game the NFL way and learning all about that. So I think he's... I think Bill Belichick, he really wants to have the power of being able to make all of the decisions. And I think he likes that, because I think that's kind of what he had when he was in New England all of those years. And it's kind of hard to step back from that once you've had all of that power or management or whatever you want to call it. It's power at the end of the day. And, once you've had all that power, it's kind of hard to take a step back and not necessarily have that power. So I think it's a perfect fit for him right now. But I'm sure there's a clause in his contract that after 1 year, he can take an NFL job if he wants to. And I think in his contract, he got some people that he wanted in there as well. So it's, I hope Bill Belichick does well, and we'll see where it goes.
He's doing this for Bill Belichick at the end of the day, right,
100%.
Josh? Like, it's not, you can say, oh, he's doing this for the college game, and that's all well and good, but he's also doing it for Bill Belichick's purpose as well.
Let's not fool ourselves. If he can bring UNC to a national championship and win it, he'll be among some very elite coaches who have won in college football and in the NFL. The difference will be that most of those players got their college championship win before they went to the NFL, not after. My impression of Bill going to UNC is that he's there to teach you how to be an NFLer. That's his whole role. That's his whole goal. So he's not necessarily there to recruit and to bring in young talent, et cetera. He's there to teach guys who are going to go to the NFL how to be an NFLer. And you know what? Given some of the ridiculousness we've seen from NFL players, I think having someone in a college environment to say to you, this is how you be a pro, is needed. But we'll see if what he brings translates to today's student, because I'm not quite so convinced that the Bill Belichick way will resonate with today's student athlete.
Jumping off of Josh's point, Cameron.
I thought I left you all speechless for a second there.
No, I was giving Cameron a second to reply if he had one. But jumping off of Josh's point, can he be the Dale Hunter of junior hockey? I mean, I know that, Bill's professional resume speaks more than Dale Hunter's professional resume for the London Knights. But you can also say that Dale Hunter, for the coach of the London Knights, is the junior hockey whisperer. He's had tons of talent come through. Could he be that, or am I giving Bill Belichick far too much credit, as Josh may have sort of alluded?
Well, let me just pose this question to you both. If you have a choice to go and learn under Bill Belichick or under Coach Prime, who are you going to go with? I have trouble believing that students are going to go flocking to North Carolina because Bill Belichick is the coach. Their parents might want them to go there, but I'm just not so sure that the students are going to want to go there. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that Coach Prime's already been there for a year, or has it been 2?
Couple years
now, and it's showing how well his program's doing. I think right now people would want to go to that program because they don't know anything about Belichick. They only know him from an NFL perspective, but huge difference between the NFL and doing the college games. So, if it was me picking, I probably would pick Coach Prime's program. Say that 5 times real quick.
No, let's not and say we did. That would be crazy to try to say that 5 times fast. I agree with you both. I think that most people are going to Coach Prime's program. But there is that college kid who's going to say, well, it's Bill Belichick. Let's give him a chance. And it's going to be more than one. There's not just going to be one kid that's going to say it's Bill Belichick. I just think it'll be very fascinating to see what Bill Belichick does, pushing 70. I don't have his exact age, but he's in and around 70, I would suggest. Do you guys think that Bill is done in the NFL? I agree with you both, and I think it is a thing that, he does have it in his contract that he can go back. Is that just to protect Bill, or is there actually an opportunity for him to go back to the NFL if he succeeds in the college game, Cameron?
Well, I'm pretty sure with the insiders from the NFL, they said that, he would get offers to coach an NFL team. Now, whether Bill Belichick wanted to coach the teams that would offer him a job are two different questions. So I think he saw the opportunity at UNC. They were offering to give him everything and the kitchen sink and a cottage and whatever else you want to say they threw in there. They didn't offer a cottage, but just making the point that they gave him everything he wanted. And I think a lot of it with Bill Belichick is about control. And he got it at UNC, and that he's not necessarily going to get the type of power he had in New England if he goes somewhere else. So I think it's a perfect fit as far as him wanting power.
As a power play, yes, I can see your point. I do think that if you back the Brinks truck up to his house, he would come back and coach in the NFL. But I just think he looked at it and said to himself, I've done everything there is to do in the NFL. This is kind of a different challenge. Let me see if I can do this. Let me put myself on the mantle with all these other great coaches who have won at college and in the pros, and see if I can do it. So I think for him, it's all about the challenge, because I think if he had just wanted another NFL job, I think the Carolina Panthers or the Chicago Bears or, any of these middling teams would have found a way to sign him if he had wanted to do it.
Do you think they would have made him the general manager, though? Because that's what he gets here at UNC.
It's true. I do think that you would see that, but it would depend on the situation. I don't know if every team's going to do it, but I think eventually a team gets desperate enough if he waits long enough and says, please fix our franchise. Carolina, I'm looking at you.
To put all that weight on somebody, like, what an ego trip you'd have. Like, you could sell Belichick the farm for all intents and purposes, but if he doesn't want to go there, he doesn't want to go there. I mean, he could have had the opportunity to rebuild the Patriots. I'm not sure what him and Robert Kraft's relationship would have tolerated that anymore, but if he wanted to do the rebuild side of things, he could have done it. And he's saying, no, I'm going to go try this. I'm going to dip my foot into this pond and see what it does. Whether it lasts for, 5 years, I don't know. He's 72 years old, as Josh put in our group. Thank you for your crack research. But yeah, it's just the way it is. And age is a factor with Bill Belichick. I don't see him, being a Greg Popovich and on the sidelines when he's pushing closer to 80. I just don't. At some point, Bill's going to say, my, 6 Super Bowl rings as a head coach and my 2 as an assistant, and then my championship in the college game, that's enough. I do not see this guy being on the sidelines till he's 80. I just don't see it, Josh.
And sorry.
Or Cameron,
I was just going to say. No, I was just going to say, like, the other thing I wanted to say to you, Baraka, and you talked, like, how long does it take to, rebuild a program, NFL compared to the college game? Is it quicker you can do it in the college game and a lot harder to do it in the NFL game? Maybe that plays a part too, because maybe he can do it quicker because he is 72. And you're getting up there in age. So you got to think about health and all those things. Can you do it? Is that why he's going there? Because you can do it quicker in the college game? I don't know.
Possibility. I don't know how quickly you can rebuild any situation, to be quite honest with you. I certainly don't think of UNC as a football team. I think of them more when it comes to college basketball and March Madness and in the spring. But that doesn't mean that they can't be. And who knows? Maybe I'll be proven dead wrong and people will flock to Carolina because he is the coach. You never really know, ultimately. But I will be surprised if this is a long-term play for Bill. I feel like there was no situation in the NFL that he wanted. And so he said, well, let's give this a try. My dad was the coach there back in the day. And so I'm going to give it a shot too.
Does he win a championship? Let's just have some fun. Does he win a championship in the college game, Cameron? Yes, no?
I don't know. I don't know anything about the college game.
Hello, fence.
I'm sitting right on it, so I don't know.
I didn't give you an I don't know. You pick one. Yes,
well, too bad. I'm picking I don't know.
Fence, my name is Cameron. Let me sit on you.
100%.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes, because I just think that he has enough cachet that even if he has to rebuild the whole program from scratch, he will manage it somehow. I'm maybe it's the AFC East in me talking and thinking that he's full of black magic or something, but I've seen him take too many things from seemingly nothing and make them into gold. So I think he can do it.
Thank you, Josh, for following the rules of the yes or no question. Cameron, I would expect nothing less of you to be the contrarian and sit on the fence. You still want to sit on the fence, or do you want to weigh in yes or no?
No, I'm sitting on the fence. I didn't even know we were going to be talking about this until less than an hour. So if I had more time to do some research, I would have a yes or no answer for you. So, and I don't. So I'm sitting right on that fence. So next time, get it to me sooner so I can make an informed decision.
Fair enough. Shots
there you
at the
go.
Producer, which I will take. That is the end of our program for this week. I would like to wish everybody the best of the holiday season. We will not be here next week, which would be the 24th of December. It's Christmas Eve. I am not releasing an episode of the podcast.
What's wrong with you?
We will release one on New Year's Eve, which
You're
is the
a mean
31st.
one, Mr.
So we will
Grinch.
be back when that is a thing and when we reach the 31st. Until then, we wish you the best of the season. I'd like to thank Cam Jenkins, Josh Watson, and I'd also like to thank our technical producer, Mark Aflalo. Stay tuned because you just never know what happens when you enter the neutral zone. Be safe, be well, and best of the season to you all.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.